By the way, we had a great Zoom yesterday. I know some of you were on it. Paul Cox, who's the general counsel for the State Board of Elections, gave an update on which laws are in effect, what changes have passed, which ones are still halted or under appeal in terms of everything from, observers to when your mail-in ballot has to be received to what IDs are accepted. And so that is going to be on the shared drive. We're gonna
Right.
once Rachel gets that loaded so everybody can watch that to get an update. It's kind of confusing for voters this year. And I know a lot of people are trying to get good information out there to let people know what they need to know to vote. So anyway, be good for everybody to watch it if you get a chance.
Good.
Hey, Jennifer,
Yeah.
I was gonna say that the Observer actually had a good article this morning on exactly those highlights in the discussion yesterday. I don't know if it's in the News and Observer as well. Oftentimes it is, but
Yeah.
if anybody wants it, I thought it was a good summary of the most relevant things that people would be asking for, like IDs and the fact that you have to have an ID for mail-in ballots and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I still think that's an egregious requirement. I mean, I don't know anybody who has a copier in their house. I mean, some people, but
How? I'm just curious how you're supposed to, if you do a mail-in ballot, how do you prove your ID? I don't understand.
You have to provide a copy of your photo ID.
Driver's license or whatever. Yeah.
you have to take a picture. Yeah, you have to take a photocopy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to send those in.
No.
Right.
Julie, would you mind sharing a link to that article that summarized it so well?
Sure. I will try to
Thank you.
get it. And I don't know if there's a paywall, but if not, I'll try to just copy and paste it.
Thank
They're
you.
supposed to make their election information not behind a paywall.
Oh,
Sort of civic responsibility, but I don't know if they always do that.
okay.
And
Yeah, I'll find it.
I just got the meeting notes from Rachel. Did y'all get those also from the last meeting we had?
I
Well,
just got
thought I had it, but I'm okay. Did you get it, Stephen?
I have not received an email.
Mine just came. Of course not. Well,
Mm-mm. Well, we can proceed on.
It's the
with-
Stephen.Duncan@Allen Tate, correct?
No, I use my private personal one. That's the tvrides@aol.com. I can open the other one though, and find it and save you from having to send it again. All right, I have it in front of me through my Allen Tate email address. We're good to go.
good. Jennifer, you wanna
Sure.
take it?
Yeah. So one of the first things and most pressing things is thinking about polling questions. So part of what we want to do is know what is on people's minds in North Carolina. What are they most concerned about? Where do they think that the process, needs improving? And one of the ways we're doing that is that Michael Bitzer has connections to Elon and Meredith and High Point, and there's one other polling firm. And they have agreed to incorporate questions from this commission in those polls. And, they have a plus or minus 3% accuracy, but it is a good way to sound out opinions across North Carolina. Now, this committee should also think about another way to get public input, and, apart from just this polling, but that's going to be really helpful. And what other committees are doing is, obviously you can't cover every single topic in your committee, but they're looking at what are the most confusing ones, what are ones that voters complain about or worry about, and trying to really dig into those and prioritize those for your research and then for your final report. So that's just, kind of a an introduction to the most pressing thing would be to get those questions together.
Well, do y'all think we should try to come up with some today together or do some separately and mail them to Rachel? What would y'all rather do?
Yeah, and they don't have to be in beautiful,
Yeah.
polling format. The poll experts will do that. If you just had even bullet points about, what are you confused about? Or, 4 bullet points of things that you think would be helpful for this committee to hear from voters.
Well, on my other 2 committees, we actually, we talked about key elements, and then in one committee, I volunteered to take all the notes and I wrote up 4 polling questions. And in another committee, the leader of the pack, Dr. Cincy, I'm not sure how to say her last name, she took it all down and put them together. And in each committee's, we're still waiting to meet on one committee to review our questions. And then in that one, we're now doing homework this week to help her finalize those questions on behalf of the committee that she had prepared. And then we doctored them up in our recent meeting. It just seems like we'll be here forever if we spend time trying to design our own 4 questions.
Yeah.
And I will volunteer. I've done a lot of polling type questions. I will take down whatever bullet points and try to design what would be some simple things, and I can send them back through to the committee and then kind of let it go from there. I don't really have the desire to jump on and volunteer again, but I'd like to see this go through more smoothly. And sometimes it's just easier to have one point of reference in a funnel.
I will also add that, sorry, this is Rachel here. I will add that last Friday when we kind of had like the kind of rough stop on submitting the polling questions, Dr. Bitzer said that he was going to put together some questions and submit on the committee's behalf. So I'm not sure if he was able to get to that. I can touch base with him, but I do know that he was planning to submit some.
Okay, well, Deanna, last time I think one of the things we talked about were who can go watch, as far as this committee is concerned, who can go watch the votes being counted and how was that carried out and that type of thing. I don't know if we want to try to delve into that either. Because we thought about actually trying, excuse me, this is my cold being awful. We were trying to get maybe some of us to go to our various polling places to see if we could watch the votes being tabulated in March.
Jennifer, we talked about that yesterday. Well, it was discussed in the presentation. And I know, and I always get a little confused because I think you can go watch, but you can't just be an observer. You have to be appointed to be an observer, and observers can actually walk around under the new law. But I do believe people can go watch. Isn't that right, Jennifer?
Yeah, so during the actual voting at the polling stations, there are 3 observers from each party that can be approved ahead of time. They have to get a badge to show who they are. They're allowed to walk around. They can't talk to voters or interfere with their voting, but they can certainly listen. They can listen to, instructions that the person who takes your ID is telling you, that kind of thing, which is kind of unnerving, but in any event, those are rules for observers of the voting process. There are also obviously people outside the polls who can give you information, if you're at the wrong precinct or whatever. There are always people who are with like Democracy NC kind of helping outside the poll. And then actual counting, the Board of Elections has cameras on their big central place where all the information comes in. And you can sit there and watch on the video. It's like watching paint dry because you can't really see what each person at their desk is doing with their, boxes of mail-in ballots and that kind of thing. But, that is all also publicly available already. And that was done in 2022 and 2020. So I don't know if you're talking about observers actually at the polls or people watching the counting, but then each county also has the ability, if you can, you watch them. I guess they take the thumb drives and stick them in the main machine that tabulates everything together and then sends it off to Raleigh. But the big one is, in Raleigh when they're certifying. And that's and you can watch, you can watch them open the mail-in ballots. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, I don't think she's on here, who's our elections person from Brunswick County, I think told us at our last meeting that Brunswick County live streams theirs. But there seemed to be some question if all of our counties did live stream. Do you know, Jennifer, or is it just some counties live stream the counting and all of that stuff?
I do not know if all 100 counties do that. I know that some counties have more resources, and the big
Excuse me.
counties definitely do that. So that'd be a question I could ask Paul Cox.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think that would be helpful for those who want to see it in action and to know how to do it. Because if my county does it, I sure don't know it. And it's not advertised, that's for sure either.
Yeah, Jennifer, I thought I thought we had talked about actually counting, watching them count the votes. And I know you're saying that some counties do it, or maybe most counties do show that live stream. But are you saying that, I actually set up a meeting with our head of Board of Elections for next week. Are you saying, and I was going to ask him if I would be able to actually watch them in person on the primary night, see how they count the votes. Are you saying that that's not possible? They're not, he's going to say no?
No. They'll let you do that.
Yeah.
Every county is different. Some of them have limited space to actually be there physically. And so they may live stream it to make it accessible to more people. And I can't remember which one Mecklenburg does, but I do remember when there was a dispute one of my elections on provisional ballots, they absolutely let, someone from each of the campaigns stand there and watch them count. They had to, be behind a certain line. And of course it's limited based on space that they have available. But I think most counties are trying to be able to live stream it.
I just got Jennifer Marcy Shealy told me, because she works at it, and she said Mecklenburg does not live stream.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating. That's interesting.
It is interesting. Little Brunswick County does. Oh, well.
Well,
Yeah.
if Mecklenburg doesn't, I feel certain Burke County does not. Absolutely certain. We've got kind of, our Board of Elections is in transition at best right now. I think we've got kind of a interim guy there who I think is, figuring it out.
So, my understanding is when they're counting votes, like in Mecklenburg, well, I think it's state law, right? Each party can appoint 3 people to be the official observers from each party, but then you can have other observers. They're just not allowed to, they're just unofficial, and they have to stay back behind whatever in seats or whatever it is.
Right. And again, I don't know if that's every county, because counties are so different, and the places that they are actually counting the votes are physically different and may have different ability to, how many people can actually watch. And the other thing is you can watch, but you can't be in a place where you actually see anybody's name. Right. So you kind of watch from afar just to see how they open the envelopes, and, you can't really double check to see what they're reading.
Well, would we want this to be a polling question or something like that? Does the public even care about seeing the votes being counted? Or,
I think people do.
yeah,
What this friend of mine is telling me, she said it's open to the public. Sometimes they have a lot of people, sometimes they don't. I suppose it depends. And there's no, there's the official ones are 3 and 3, but just anybody can show up, including independents, to watch vote counting.
Yeah, and that's not true for observing within the polling site.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Those folks have to be submitted ahead and approved, but But you're right, that, the counting, dependent on space availability.
I found with Buncombe County that we had probably as much interest in observing through the live stream while we were actually opening and bringing in the mail-in ballots and the dropped off ballots. We had as much interest in watching us do that as we did election night, because we had 248 appeals because there was a group watching, and they appealed 248 ballots that were ultimately rejected because they were not completed ballots and they were clearly erroneous information. And that was they were unanimously removed at that point. And then in the appeals process, it was a 4-1 vote with the chairman voting to leave them in. But that was that was interesting because we were live streaming, and there were people online because you can see how many people are watching because we had it up on a big screen, and we always had anywhere from 15 to 25 people watching us during those wonderful 14-hour days. So I'm not sure which one we're talking about here, but I would encourage in our recommendation that that the ability to live stream for both of these events should be in place. They're not that hard to set up with a camera and a computer so that people can at least watch and hear the discussion.
So Stephen, that is great because
Yep.
what we want committees to start doing is thinking about, what are people concerned about? And clearly they're going to want to watch the tabulation this year because it's such a highly contested election at many different levels. And a recommendation that all counties provide live stream is a really good one.
Yep.
And then of course, the question would be, where do the resources come from to do that? But I think it's great. And what some committees are doing is thinking about what would be a likely recommendation, and then going and seeing, what states do this already. What would be, a mechanism for doing that? And, kind of putting a little more detail and facts and statistics behind that recommendation. But if you already know at this point that that's going to be something you want to include, then, this is great because you're making progress.
I would certainly agree with Stephen on that we make that a recommendation. And also, because you also said it was the provisionals and everything else, right, Stephen? Yep.
I think also one of the benefits, the ability to have more eyes on it is it can have the impact of modifying behavior, because sometimes it gets a little testy in there. And when people know they're on camera and being recorded and they don't even know who's watching, sometimes that can be a way to calm things down a little.
A behavior modification technique.
Yeah.
Great. Already making progress. And there may be other areas that you believe the public is concerned about. Some of these polling memos will help, but we were also told by Michael Bitster that some of these polling results won't be known until May. And so I think, your committee is going to need to, you've already clearly heard from a lot of people that are concerned about this issue. So that's great. But you might want to think about other ways to get more feedback more quickly to see what other areas would be really important to focus on. And maybe you have some good ideas already.
How difficult
Probably
would it be
Jennifer,
to, how difficult would it be to, I don't know how these committees, how they can function, but if we had Corrine from Buncombe County, who I think did an extraordinarily good job. And then we look at some other, I guess, larger counties there just seem to be where there's more apt for questions or issues. If we had 2, 3, 4 of these election supervisors, directors, actually by title, it would be nice to hear what some of them would actually, and how they would answer these questions. You know, if they were, if they could wave their magic wand, which is what I say in real estate a lot, if you could wave your magic wand and make some recommendations concerning the day of or the counting of ballots, whether they're mail-in, whether they're provisional, whether they're, you know, day of voting or whatever the situation may be, early voting. It'd be nice to see if they could make a recommendation. And I think it would be nice to hear it from a larger community because they've got a large staff. They've got many more questions that may have to be addressed prior to the election day and during election day counting. I just wonder how difficult it'd be to find 3 or 4 of these around the state and work out an interview time either by Zoom or in person.
Yep.
Good suggestion.
Well, and that's something other committees have also asked about, because clearly we want to hear from election directors what are the issues currently. And, you know, half our election directors are new. So you want to find the ones that have had experience, not the ones who just got hired a year ago, ones who've been through a presidential election. And what we should do, Rachel, is think about maybe consolidating some of the interviews and questions so we don't bombard election directors from 11 different committees.
Yeah, especially right now. Yep.
Yeah, you might want to wait till early voting is over.
Yeah.
Because it starts tomorrow. But
Well, maybe,
yeah. But the other thing is that in your notes, you thought about asking an expert from the School of Government to, you know, meet with this committee and, you know, to answer some of those questions from their academic perspective of having done research on this kind of thing. And the names that you lifted last time were Michael Crow, Bob Joyce, or Bob Hunter. So that's something else that you could, for your next meeting, ask one of those folks to join you. But Rachel and I will look at what other committees are thinking about in terms of talking to election directors and get back with you about whether we can, you know, join in together jointly and get some of those questions answered.
I do know that Michael Crowell used to be the School of Government, is now in private practice. He's sort of semi-retired. I do not know if Bob Joyce is still at the School of Government. Does anybody know? And I don't know him.
No, but he's written a lot on
Yeah. Okay.
on election administration in general. So
Okay.
he'd be great. But we can ask about that too. We can ask our professors on the steering committee.
Jennifer and Julie, you all were on the call yesterday. Kind of remind me, someone was talking about putting together a survey of some sort. What was that? Can you all help with that? What was that? Who was that directed towards? Y'all remember that? It was in the chat.
Oh, I didn't read it in the chat. I have a hard time listening and then looking at the chat.
Okay.
Sometimes. I don't recall that, Caroline.
Did you see that, Jennifer? You remember somebody in the chat said they were putting together, some kind of survey. And I got the feeling it was a list of questions that they wanted people on the commission to ask the director of the local boards of elections. Am I just dreaming that?
So this is different from the polling questions that we've got from Elonix. Okay. I'll have to go back and look at the notes because I don't remember specifically that either.
I can't remember who it was. It was in the notes, and somebody said they were putting something together like that. And anyway, I thought it was questions that, you know, that we were gonna ask, you know, anyway. Okay.
Well,
the heads of the boards of elections. Yeah. Of locals.
Yeah, no, clearly they're, they would be really helpful and have all the, the expertise and can answer even some of the public concerns, because clearly their offices get all kinds of phone calls, FOIA requests and more. And they know, kind of what people don't trust. I mean, I know from having done our town hall tour in 2022 that people don't trust computers. They just don't. So that's why we have a paper backup for every single ballot in North Carolina. Um, and some counties don't even use computers, don't use the ballot marking device. They just go, do it all by hand, the smaller counties. But I'll have to look back and see if we can figure out what that survey was about. But we also need to figure out the best way to get information from election directors without overburdening them. So
Rachel here. I just reviewed the chat from the meeting yesterday and did not see anything to that effect.
you may be getting mixed up with a different committee.
Maybe I might be. Okay, I'm just trying to think. Okay. It might have been a Monday, Rachel, anyway, okay.
By the way, I did put that article in the chat, so if
Yeah,
you want.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and there's no paywall.
Good. Do
Good.
y'all remember at our last meeting, I think Sarah, the Brunswick County Elections Director, was going to get together with some other election directors and ask them something. Do y'all recall that? But I'm not sure what it was she was going to ask. Did anybody remember that? No. Do you remember that, Rachel?
I'm looking at the notes right now to see if I can find it.
I was looking on the notes here, but because I remember thinking, how is she gonna have time to do all this stuff?
She's on several committees, and it's very likely that she mentioned it in another committee.
Yeah,
So I'll have to look back on other notes from the committee she's on, but I know that she has mentioned that in the past.
yeah. Okay.
Rachel, I'm going through some of the emails because I definitely saw it somewhere. I'm going through some, it might have been a reply to all. Anyway.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed that Sarah also said that they were considering a state board of elections representative as an expert to talk about how votes are counted. So in addition to the School of Government folks, Sarah might have another expert
Yep.
who has time to give sort of the outline and also to say, what parts of counting maybe do the officials want to improve and transparency, et cetera.
Will Jennifer, will the steering committee people invite these folks to speak with us?
Yes.
Bob Joyce or a Board of Elections person and or both? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we can certainly reach out. I think there's some folks on the steering committee who know Bob Joyce. Some of the professors, I believe, know him.
Okay.
Okay, I've found it, Rachel. It was an email and it was from last Friday's meeting, the meeting on the Committee on Civic Education. And this was a different thing, but Catherine Comp said that she was going to, she talked about Jennifer, Rachel, Martha, are there other committees planning to survey county election directors? If so, should we work across committees to send one survey to all of them? It was in an email she sent on Monday. Yeah.
And
Anyway.
that's what we were just talking about in terms of, making sure the committees get together to do it just once so we don't overwhelm them.
Yeah.
Good. There's also, I think in that same committee, there was, Leslie is going to work with the 39 colleges that they work on engagement with and try to get feedback from college students on issues that they have with voting. And so that's another one that's going on independently of, the Elon and Meredith polls. And Leslie's on several committees as well, which is great.
Maybe she can keep up with them better than I can. I'm getting them all muddled in my head. Yeah.
Another thing that you all talked about last time was trying to track voters who are in 2 different states.
Yep. We were concerned about double voting and It seems like after talking to Sarah, or listening to what she said, I'm not sure there's anything this committee could do.
Well,
very-
and there's another committee, you know, looking at voter registration and access that's talking about this as well.
Yeah,
So, you know, I think that's probably not something, you know, if y'all are looking at really just counting and the process of counting and, you know,
Yeah.
recounts and challenges and that kind of thing, that's probably more important than how registration lists are handled,
yeah,
because someone else is looking at that.
okay.
Jennifer, I thought something was interesting that came out last night was in the change of laws. The fact that the Board of Elections can't count early votes
Yeah.
until the poll has closed.
Yep.
I would think that would be a huge burden for these individual boards.
Yeah,
That's a really good point that not only for the boards, because that it's going to delay everything by an hour or two, but also that trust. People do think that, you know, if you delay, I mean, I know I've seen the Facebook posts. If you don't get your results in until midnight, they're like, what's going on behind the scenes there, right? It's
Yeah.
one thing that frustrates people. So that's a really good issue to to also bring up. Was that a good change? How do people feel about that? And you know, may even see some of the feedback come from the primaries. We'll
Yeah, I
see
mean,
how
I
yeah.
understand clearly why you can't release it before the polls close, but once the polls close, to me, those are the results, you know? I mean, and they're reported independent of how the rest of the, you know, how election day went. I would think, I don't know, that to me gives me confidence that those are just reported as they are with no prejudice to whatever happens on election day. But I didn't change the rules, so.
No, that's a good point. And some of the things, yeah, some of the changes that are recent, they might be good things to focus on,
mhm,
because they will be, you know, confusing to voters, and we'll have a sense after the primaries of whether they, you know, were helpful or not. Stephen, you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood. What did they change? Because in Buncombe County, we, you know, every night, at the end of the night, we ran sometimes thousands of ballots through the counting machine. Now, all the information about who, what, when, where, and how the ballots went were, of course, protected, but, and was not released. But, you know, we had to verify, you know, we had, you know, 2,800 ballots cast, and we had 2,800 show up on the machine as counted. And so that was done. So a lot of what they did on election night was they just released by precinct. And it was a combination of day of voting and early voting, but they released them precinct by precinct. So the timing of the release was not tied to not having the data or getting the data, but it was when that particular precinct day of voting was finalized. So have they changed that?
So the difference is used to, you know, at 7:30, you would see on the county website 3,000 early votes for so-and-so, like right at 7:30, because they had already run the tabulators, they had the total, they just didn't release that total until all the polls had closed. And there were some years, you know, one poll stayed open an extra half hour because it had an electricity problem or something, and they waited till 8 o'clock to release those, but they had that already tabulated and ready to go. Now what the new rule says is you can't even start counting those votes, tabulating them or anything until 7:30. And what we heard from Paul Cox is that that can take an hour or more, especially in large counties that have, you know, 300,000 early votes, right? It can take a while to load those into the tabulator, collect all the different precinct data, even though you've had that from early voting for 5 days, right? Or however many days between stop early voting and when the actual election is. So it just, it puts a time pressure on the election officials. They can't, get that lined up, ready to go so that they have some early indication of how people are doing. It delays everything by that hour to an hour and a half. Because they can't start counting the day of ballots until they've done the early stuff. I mean, I guess they could do it simultaneously if they have enough, they have enough machines and people. But that was the change that Paul was explaining to us.
And since I wasn't able to join last night, I mean, did Paul say why they did this?
He could not.
Yeah. Okay.
Really, I guess
Politics.
that the fear would be that somebody still in line would see something, if the timing was 5 minutes off or something, people standing in line at one polling site might see the early results and then say, oh, I don't need to vote for so-and-so, they've already won. You know what I mean? So I think it
Yeah.
was something like that.
Hmm.
And to be fair, sometimes there are people still in line at 7:30, and if you're in line, you're supposed to be allowed to vote. And so I've been at a polling site where at 7:30, they give the last person in line a sign and say, you're the last person that can vote. And so when you get to the front of the line, nobody after you gets to vote, but they do keep voting after 7:30. Now, also when that happens, the county is not supposed to release anything until that last person has voted. So, it's kind of a double check, I guess. But anyways, that could be topic number 2.
Yeah.
So you've got two good topics.
Yeah, I
The
think
early voting count and the live stream of tabulations, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, I just would be curious, and maybe they already collected this information, but to get feedback from those supervisors of what kind of an impact that's going to have on them, that they can't even start counting those votes until the polls close.
Yeah.
Because it's leading up to that. It's busy over there every night counting votes. And
Yeah.
I don't know, does that include the what do you call the overseas ones? Akava.
Yeah, Awaka, whatever.
Oahu.
Those are not
Whatever it is.
included. Those are exceptions.
Okay, so they can count because they're counting those now. They've already started counting those, but they can't count absentee until.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm sorry. They're exceptions for when they have to be received. But they're not exceptions for the counting.
Okay, so none of them, even overseas, any kind of absentee ballot, none of that can be counted until the polls close. That's crazy. I would think there would be pushback on that, but
Well, and I would think also it's going to lead, this year is going to take longer to get the results, and this is going to lead to more questions from the general public about what's going on, because it's taking longer than it used to. And they won't know it's because you can't start counting the absentees until the polls close. It just,
So I just thought of something this would be really great. As we get the different committees together for responses from election directors, we should do this poll of directors after the primaries and after the primary votes have been certified, like after that whole process is over, to give feedback on what worked well, what was an issue, were changes
that's a great
helpful.
idea.
Yeah. So maybe sometime in, either early April or late March, or even, sometime in April, to get that feedback would be really helpful.
that would be good. So we got two polling questions. What else, y'all?
Don't talk about recounts or hand-eye recounts or any of that, audits, that kind of thing.
What was the specifics to the second question or idea? Sorry about the phone in the background.
Oh, the second one was just whether it was helpful to delay any tabulating or posting of results, any counting of the votes until 7:30 on election day, if it was helpful or not, in
And
terms
I
of,
would just, if we could add to that, and what was the public perception of that, if we could.
what about, as you all, 'cause another thing that Paul raised was, curing ballots, so that if absentee ballots come in with a signature missing, or whatever, the ability of voters to, cure those so that they still get counted. Was that anything that this committee had talked about yet?
I don't think we've talked about that.
So that's part of making sure votes are counted.
Yeah.
I can't remember if there were any changes.
I'm just curious what the mechanism is. If I vote absentee and I do something wrong, how do I cure that? Or do I?
Well, I can tell you, because I helped call people to cure their ballots in 2022, and we went from I think 40% turnout to 41%. Anyway, it did change the number of ballots that came in Mecklenburg County. And what happened was, I talked to a couple who forgot to get a witness signature on their absentee ballot. And so I called them up and said, you need to get a witness. And they needed to go down to the Board of Elections with a neighbor or a witness or whatever to sign to verify it was indeed their signature. And they
Okay.
could do that, and then their vote would count.
Okay.
And so so they, I don't know whether the Board of Elections calls people, or I think I send them a notice. They send them a postcard.
Oh, good luck with the mail. Oh, well.
Well,
It's-
and I was on behalf of the Democrat Party, I was
Yeah.
following up. I was following up by
Yeah.
phone. Because they got phone bank. I'm sure that both parties got phone banks to try to cure ballots.
What's the time limit to cure a ballot? Do you know?
Is it 5 days, Rachel? Do you remember you were on the call? Paul, I think, yeah, Julie's got notes.
5 days? Yeah.
I think it's 5 days. Okay, 5 business days, right? Yeah.
5 days post-election day.
Yep.
And then that article you'll see also mentioned that they have a new signature verification program that is in pilot. But the idea is that if it says that your signature doesn't match your original registration, it'll, in theory, it'll kick it out. But that this year they're not going to kick any out. They're just running it as a pilot. I don't know how you cure that, because then they mail it back to you. But if you don't get your mail, I don't know. That one seems
Yeah.
fraught with problems.
Well, and only having 5 days, you send a postcard, even if it's local, it can take 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
One
Well,
day.
Christmas cards, it took me 10 days to get Christmas cards from Greensboro. I mean, it's just, unfortunately, I hate we have to depend on, I wish there's something else we could use that would be a bit faster and more dependable than the mail.
Yeah. Yep. We don't have emails for everybody, and you can't count on that either.
No, no,
So did he say yesterday that they're changing the amount of time? Are they changing the amount of time that you can cure a ballot? No, I didn't hear that.
No, it's the same.
5
And,
days.
and the only way you do that, you don't go door to door to do that. You only do that by phone or by mail. Is that right, Jennifer?
You do it, the board, the elections do it by mail. The reason we did it by phone is that each political party gets a list of those ballots that have been pulled for missing something, and they can get phone numbers if they're in their database. So you know, there's a Democratic database and a Republican database of registered voters. And if they have the phone number, which we often don't,
Yeah.
or it's old or people have moved or whatever, but you do the best you can, right? Yeah, you call people and follow up. So it's
I
not,
thought we did that some door to door in 4 years ago. But not, and I thought we actually had 2 weeks rather than just 5 days. No? No, okay.
again, door to door would probably be a political party organizing. Because the state, the board doesn't have that kind of money. And on the signature matching, yeah, there are 10 counties that are in the pilot program. And I guess they're gonna see how many signatures get kicked back by the computer. I know a lot of people are very worried about that because your signature changes over 30 years, right? And, you know, how good is this computer program? I think that's what they're testing, is whether this computer program can be trusted. Is it accurate enough, or does it kick back, you know, half of the ballots, in which case that would be ridiculous. So they're
So
gonna,
if,
It seems to me that somebody who's trying to, you know, willfully submit a ballot that isn't, you know, theirs, can take the time to copy a signature, you know, it just doesn't seem like it's a real productive use of resources.
Well,
And elderly people, I mean, elderly people are just nailed in it. I mean, I've
Yeah.
got 2 parents that are 95 and 93. Honestly, that's, I already feel like they are elderly, are at a, they're victims of a lot of these changes. Yeah.
I agree. I think that's something we should, I don't know, I think that's something we should put on there because to your point, Caroline, people's signatures, you know, you've got arthritis, whatever, they're going to change
Yep.
over the course of 30 years versus somebody who's, Jennifer, I thought your example yesterday was hilarious. The guy who was trying to vote for his dead father, but he had already voted and he had his I voted sticker on.
that's great.
That
that
was,
really happened in one county.
yeah, I mean, he knows what his dad's signature, I sure knew what my mom's signature looked like in high school.
That is
So,
a really good point.
Yep.
yeah. So I just wonder how, you know, how effective that's really going to be, and is it going to really, you know, be punitive for older people?
So
Well,
if your
it's helpful.
signature gets kicked out, then what happens? Do they call you and say it got kicked out or what?
They write you a letter.
Write you another
Postcard.
letter, which you may or may not get.
Yep.
Yep,
And again, that could be something this committee could look at.
yep.
And see how many states do it, what's the failure rate, success rate, you know, make a recommendation. Stephen?
Well, I guess I'm gonna be the lone gun here. In 2018, we looked at piles of these, and honestly, we could pull up on we were allowed in 2018 to pull up on our computer and look at the previous ballots submitted and signatures. And there are key letters, S's, G's, that and other letters that even though it may get scribbly in between, I used to could read my dad's, but not as well anymore. But you can actually see a progression. And there really isn't more than about 4 years or so between votes since they last signed. And even though we did look at piles of them, there really weren't that many tossed out because the signatures clearly did not match. And the boards voted on them. And we rarely had any dissenting votes with a bipartisan support on those. But in 2020, between our legislature and whatever else, we were not even allowed to even discuss or look at those. We had a memo from the state board that says you'll follow the following edicts. Otherwise, please be reminded you can be removed from the board. So you had to go along under the threat of being removed from the board, and so honestly, signatures are, in my opinion, key. And I'm more in the, if you're looking at them with your own eye quickly, if they don't look like right, they're going to stand out. But if they are anywhere close and you got 1,000 ballots to look at, you're going to move quickly because you can say, well, they're getting older. They're got arthritis. They got whatever issue. I think signatures are key to verification. Otherwise, you're limiting your ability to have verification from the piles of mail-in ballots. So that's my 2 cents.
And that just shows there's different views on this. I think the question will be, does the AI software do it as well as human beings who are empathetic, right?
Yeah.
I do have some concerns about the computer because as signatures do change, if they don't have a continuous record of how that ballot has done over the last 2, 3, 4 elections, I think an inordinate number of them will be kicked out. And I don't think that is fair. And I'm not, I was on a bipartisan, and yes, we had some disagreements on some, but and it did take time, but it was clearly a much, in my opinion, fairer process from actual participation in that between 2018 and the inability to do it in 2020.
Yep.
Maybe one of the
Absolutely.
things this committee could look at is if indeed signature matching becomes law, here are some aspects of it we would require, right? Or we would ask it to include, because sometimes the devil's in the details.
Yep.
That I'm just saying that might be something if there's, and committees are gonna not get unanimous agreement on different issues, but you can always look at what other states are doing, what other details have they put in there in terms of the right way to do something. I mean, that was true of voter ID, right? How many documents do you include? How much leeway do you give? That sort of thing. What's the guidance that makes it not an obstacle to people voting?
So I think that's a great idea because we would be proactive instead of reactive. I mean, trying to get some input before it does become law. So it might be we could talk to some of these 10 pilot programs and see how things went in the primary for signature matching. I'm just curious, Jennifer, because you mentioned that on behalf of the party, you will call these people who perhaps were having signature problems or needed to cure their vote. But what about the independents? Because there's no party. I mean, how does that work? Because we have so many independents now.
Absolutely. Now for obviously in a primary, you would know if they picked which primary they picked, but
Yeah,
you're right, in the
yeah.
general election, you could, if somebody splits their ballot, right, they're independent, unaffiliated, and they split their ballot, then maybe nobody calls them.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
No,
Yeah.
but I don't know what we do.
And there are a lot of committees looking at the whole unaffiliated question because it's hard to, there are a lot of things that unaffiliated voters get left out of in our
Yep,
current
right.
system.
Yep.
So that could be another another thing to raise.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that fits in, but that's a great point because I don't think the only question I ever get is about in the primaries, which ballot should I take or why register as unaffiliated? But in one of these committees, I think it would be very educational to have information on what unaffiliateds do get left out of. I don't think I know really.
Yeah.
Well, they can't serve as observers.
Yeah, that's true.
Have to be a member of Democrats or Republicans. They also do not automatically get appointed to a board. The boards of elections, the Democrats get 2, the Republicans get 2, and the 5th one right now is appointed by the governor, who theoretically could put an unaffiliated person in there, but I don't think ever has, right? I don't think any governor ever has.
And you say right now because the pending law is tied up in the courts.
Exactly.
Because that wouldn't be the case. It would be if it would be 2 and 2 or 4 and 4.
It'd be 4 and 4, and you're
4 and
right.
4, and then the General Assembly, the leadership of the General Assembly makes the
Break
call.
the tie, would break the tie. And you're right, that would leave unaffiliated voters out completely, statutorily.
So I mean, I just think that's something we might want to put down.
Yeah,
You know, how unaffiliated voters are treated compared to registered political parties. It truly does not seem fair at all to me. And I
yeah,
think most unaffiliated voters don't even realize what they're getting left out, what they might be missing.
a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that could absolutely fall into this.
Yeah.
Some category.
Yeah, it's counting votes, and also, you know, the day of the process observers, that kind of thing. It probably, cuts through several committees, but certainly, you know, this committee could raise it as well.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see how many committees do find that the whole unaffiliated question is a big issue.
Yeah.
Because that could very well be heard, maybe, when the report comes out.
Yep.
I apologize, folks. I have to hop. I have another meeting starting in a few minutes, but I think
Matter of fact, are we past our time limit already?
We
Yep.
are done. Yep, our time is up. So thanks. We at least have 3 good questions, or is that 3 or 4? Rachel's taking notes.
I've got 5. Anyway.
Yeah, we have several.
Okay, good.
I'll wait to read the minutes to figure out what we actually said.
Excellent. Rachel will send those around. This has been recorded, and we'll see you again next month. And the steering committee will look to see if one of those experts can come and
Great.
some of those questions.
Okay, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Later. Enjoy the sunshine.